русском, и затем переключимся на английский. Ну что ж, будем присоединяться к глобальному академическому сообществу и будем в дальнейшем тоже стараться по возможности как-то уже участвовать в таких более международных мероприятиях и использовать чаще английский язык. Ну что ж, все, мы полностью готовы, можем начинать. Меня зовут Екатерина Царанок, я директор Modern Education and Research Institute, и на нашей базе находится международная лаборатория инклюзивного образования, где сегодня вы являетесь гостями. Сегодня у нас будет очень интересная дискуссия с нашими новыми партнерами. Возможно, вы уже видели у нас на Фейсбуке объявление о том, что мы заключили партнерское соглашение с организацией из Иордании, Омана, это Global Village for International Studies and Strategic Planning, организация, которая занимается вопросами инклюзии, вопросами прав человека. И сегодня мы пригласили основателя этой организации, который, кроме того, что является основателем данной платформы, еще и очень интересный человек. Это доктор Мухаммад Тарауне, который, вот помимо того, как я уже сказала, что он генеральный директор Global Village for International Studies and Strategic Planning, он еще и посол доброй воли ООН по вопросам мира и развития, а также инаугурационный председатель комитета ООН, Управление Верховного комиссара Организации Объединенных Наций по правам человека. Он сам работал в ООН в течение 2 мандатов в Комитете по правам человека и сейчас является специальным советником, докладчиком специальных строительных норм и правил муниципалитета Омана в Иордании. Наш с ним диалог будет проходить на английском языке, потому что, по объективным причинам. И перед тем, как начать непосредственно разговор, я бы хотела дать слово Дмитрию Владимировичу Лепишеву, который, я думаю, что на этой платформе представлять и не надо. Это отец-основатель нашей платформы. Дмитрий Владимирович, пожалуйста, вам слово.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Искренне приветствую всех участников сегодняшней нашей традиционной встречи в Международной лаборатории инклюзивного пространства. Я искренне благодарю Екатерину и ее команду за то, что мы находим таких интересных партнеров, которые действительно могут нам приоткрыть очень интересные моменты, связанные не только с современным состоянием инклюзивных практик, которые есть сегодня вообще в общепринятой норме, скажем, да, которую рассматривает и Организация Объединенных Наций, и ЮНИСЕФ, и ЮНЕСКО, и другие международные организации, которые находятся под эгидой ООН. Для чего? Для того, чтобы мы могли выверить свой педагогический компас в приоритетах и направлениях взаимодействия в социуме. Именно то, о чем я всегда говорю, о формировании инклюзивной культуры. Я думаю, что сегодняшняя встреча это будет очередной трамплин для всех нас. Но, во-первых, мы сегодня с вами будем обогащать и расширять знания английского языка. Это первое, это очень важно. А второй момент, очень важно, я думаю, что те вопросы, которые мы обговаривали с Екатериной, они будут интересны, и они сформулированы очень на простом английском языке, если честно, потому что даже когда Екатерина предложила вопросы, я вносил коррекцию, я сразу их переводил практически на английский язык, я понимал, о чем будет звучать вопрос, который будет задан нашему сегодняшнему спикеру, который будет нам сегодня раскрывать вот эти разные грани и возможности инклюзивного пространства, которое есть на сегодняшний день. Я хочу надеяться на то, что эта встреча будет действительно плодотворной, интересной, и желаю нам всем в первую очередь мира и спокойствия в душе, несмотря на те катаклизмы, которые есть сегодня в природе во всем мире. Я хочу верить в то, что пандемия должна уходить, а мы должны беречь друг друга во имя процветания и развития инклюзивных практик. Благодарю всех за сегодняшнюю встречу.
Спасибо вам большое, Дмитрий Владимирович. Да, действительно, сегодня у нас очень интересный собеседник, необычный собеседник. Мы, конечно, очень рады, что человек такого уровня, как доктор Тарвана, согласился провести эту встречу с нами. Я думаю, что мы узнаем много полезной информации о том, как международная организация воспринимает инклюзию, как международная организация воспринимает права человека в инклюзивном пространстве. И в конце, конечно, вы сможете задать тоже свои вопросы, можете их задать по-русски, мы переведем на английский, если кому-то будет неудобно слушать. Ну что ж, доктор Tarwana, we are moving to you, we are switching back to English. I have already made a short presentation, not maybe short, but so I have already made a presentation of your organization and of our partnership agreement and plans that we have for partnership with you. And I think we can already go on and start conversation. And my first question is, of course, like every first question in the academic community would be, is definition. So what is inclusion? And although all the colleagues here are experts in inclusive education, still we know that there are differences in understanding of what inclusion is in different countries, in different legislative systems. What are we going to understand under inclusion during this conversation? Dr. Tarwana, are you there?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ekaterina, for the kind introduction in Russian, which you explained in English. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Modern Institute and with this entire esteemed team and our team at the Global Village for having this memorandum of understanding, which I hope and I know that is going to be a very fruitful memorandum of understanding. I will jump, due to time limitation, I will jump very quickly to the questions. And I'm sure colleagues from the Global Village, I think we have Khulud, we have Olga, we have, I think, Elena. They can jump and interfere in any of the questions that they would like to. What is inclusion? That's question number one. And if I may say, before I define inclusion, I want to say, let's talk about human rights for a second. Human rights, we always call it inherited rights. So inherited rights means that the minute a person, he or she, are born, their rights are born with them completely. You know, so no one can take these rights, but due to many reasons and political reasons, economical conflict, blah blah blah, these rights being hindered by different reasons. So an inclusion, it means, you know, can lead to inclusiveness, having everybody covered. So in our topic today, when we talk about inclusion education, this means education for all. It should be no discrimination under no ground whatsoever. Let's say a kid with disability and a kid without disability attending a class, they should have the same equal opportunity. And there should be no discrimination on the grounds of disability, having in mind that we would like to think of the ability of the students, not the disability. And if we make a comparison, we have the two kids have the ability to learn, except one kid, you might have to do an extra effort to get the point across to, or just use slightly different methodology, and really, and this lies on the student with disability and the students with non-disabilities, on the families, on the schools itself, and at large at the society as a whole. Because, again, we live in a global village that should be inclusive and for all of us, so the concept of inclusion is not to leave anybody behind, which in turn takes some of their rights away, whether it's in education or whether it's in health or whether it's in any other matter. So that's what's an inclusive. That's why we now focus a lot on inclusive societies, and that is what Goals 2030 goals focus a lot on that particular concept. And your second question is like, who supports inclusion and how? I think everybody, we all should support inclusion, as individuals, as institutions, as governments, as private sector, as public sector. Everybody should suppose to support that concept, because at the end of the day, when you live in a society, society is typically composed of what we call in terminology, it's societies for all, so diversity in humankind. So when you are born, again, you're born with your human rights, regardless of your status, whether you're born with disability, without disability, black, white, yellow, green, whatever, at the end of the day, you are a human being. So these rights are born with you, and therefore, we should think of inclusion in everything, and especially in inclusive societies, by all means, and especially in inclusive education, because it's a very important topic. And this is one topic during my 8 years at the United Nations, always was a very tricky topic to tackle, that one and legal capacity, Article 12 of the Convention, because there is a lot of controversy about it. But a modern society, looks at it as any other issue, and should promote inclusive education. Now, if we want to talk about the attitudes and values in inclusive space affect each other, yes, as mentioned, attitudinal barriers, there is two kinds of barriers. There is physical or architectural barriers that can hinder inclusive education, and the other one is social or attitudinal barriers. In a different word, it's like, and that leads to discrimination, if you focus on for example, the kid with non-disability and not pay enough attention to the kid with disability, even though they both have the same mind capabilities to understand the lecture or the lesson or whatsoever, because, it's an inclusive society. As far as the inclusive space, whatever, like we said, all kind of measures from architectural barriers need to be removed in order to ensure inclusiveness in that particular school or university or college or so on. And the common misconception hinder inclusion. People always have this this stigma that if you are a person with disability, it means your capability of thinking is less than a person, comparing with a person with non-disability, which is totally wrong. If you look at Steve Hopkins, for example, the guy was totally everything. I mean, nothing in him can move except his eyes, but yet he was one of the greatest scientists in the world, discovered the black hole. So, looking at the disability and not looking at the student and the rights of the students, that's the main misconception that hinder inclusion. And now you have question 5 and 6 really and very interrelated when you talk about inclusion or universality, or inclusion or barrier-free. Now, in order in order to ensure inclusion, you have to think in a universal concept, which is what we call it in engineering, universal design, and that have an impact on the physical barriers mainly. And same thing really for question 6, inclusion or barrier-free access, which is a subtitle of universality or universal design. So in those two items, we're talking about the physical environment, not the social status, as we mentioned earlier. And your question number 7 says, what does education have in the system of human right? What place does education have in the system of human right? It have a very high place. Keeping in education have a very high place as long as we do not discriminate on any grounds whatsoever, whether it's disability or color, sex, ethnicity, background, origin. So it should be a discrimination-free area, but education is highly looked at because education is the key to success. As we say here in the Arab region, maybe today's kid is tomorrow's leader. So, therefore, you have to give an extra amount of effort toward education in order for him to be well aware of everything. On number 8, giving the education today is a product. So, and I like the way this question has been phrased, education as a product. So, that takes us to the business arena in a way. Sometimes even an elite product, can we say that there is a violation of human rights and education in general? Here, I would say yes and no. Yes, there is a violation of human rights if we discriminate on the ground of disability toward any students, whether they are KG students or whether they are university students. And is education a business model? Yes, it is a business model because most universities and institutions, while they give you the best education, in the same time, they want to make revenues. So I would definitely look at it from part of it from a business perspective, and I think Ms. Olga can collaborate in that particular issue in just a minute or so. Let's see, on number 9, it says there is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Why is it necessary to create an additional convention on the rights of persons with disabilities? And it's not in 205, it's in 206 it was adopted. Why there is such a big time gap between the two documents? Very good questions. As you all well aware, there are 10 human rights conventions up to date. You have the CRPD, CRC, CEDAW, and Convention on the Elderly, and so on and so on. But in 1948, that's when the United Nations was created. And the first thing they came up with to preserve, because there was a major demolishing to the human rights system at that particular year. So the first thing United Nations decided to come up with is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But again, human rights varies from one country to another, from one region to another. Economy have a great impact on it. Conflict have a great impact to it. Natural disasters have a great impact to it. So, and as we said, your rights are inherited rights. No one should take those rights. And I agree, if nobody played with these rights, then we wouldn't need the 10 United Nations conventions. But due to the reasons that I have stated, governments or authorities, depending on what part of the world, they start to what we call prioritization. So they have an ex-government have 10 issues to deal with, maybe in the political front, or maybe on the economical front, social front, so the disability issue has always been marginalized. So it's always been left the last thing that these governments think about, even though if we look at any constitution of any country of the world, it says all citizens are equal in rights and dues. So while your constitution say that, but in the meantime, the legislations of that particular country hinders that to be translated exactly into the right words by marginalizing issues. Very quick note I want to say, the disability movement have changed from in three models. First, back in the 40s and 50s and early 60s, it was looked at as a pure medical model. So if they see a person with disability, you know, what we call in the States, they used to call him, in a way, I'm sorry to say that, vegetable. Like, you know, if you have a physical disability, it means, you know, you cannot function. You're out of the system, which is totally wrong, you know. Anybody can function, you know, because a human being is a mind. The rest of the body is parts that the mind control. That brings the discrimination in that particular field. So civil society movements and DPOs, which is disabled person organizations and so on, kept lobbying at a large scale under an international umbrella, and lobbying to the UN that there is a need, we need a convention to protect our already given rights from God, okay? So now it's like we need a second reinforcement of those rights. So you will be surprised that the Libyan ambassador in on one of the General Assembly meetings back in the 80s, of course, with lobbying from civil society and NGOs, DPOs, IGOs, and so on, raised the issue of they should have some international instruments to control, to preserve the rights of disability. So they kept lobbying and lobbying, and they, back in the 90s, they came up with the standard rules of equalization, which most countries signed. But they, you know, the problem with the standard rules of equalization, when you sign an international declaration, it's not binding at the national level because it's not like a convention. It's not ratified. So there is a major difference between signing and ratifying. So, and that's why it was not ratified. In 2002, almost the entire world, especially from civil society organization, under an umbrella called IDA, International Disability Alliance, and other alliances from all regions, lobbied really hard. And finally, the United Nations said, okay, we need to draft a convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. That took us from 2002 to 2004. I have the distinct pleasure to be a part of it, representing the MENA region, along with other colleagues. And we finished drafting it toward the end of 2005, mid 2006. And finally, during General Assembly, again, it was put into vote to countries. And thank God, countries voted for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which entered into force in 2007. So that is the background, quick background on how the development of the convention, and how, again, you know, we're not inventing new rights, you know, and we're not inventing the wheel. The rights are there. As we said, you know, they are inherited rights, but for somehow, due to like the many reasons I stated, political, other reasons, resources, different regions, of the world, third world countries, and so on, start to kind of manipulate in that particular part. But finally, like I said, in 2006, it was adopted. 2007 entered into force. Jordan was like second or third countries who signed and ratified the convention. Most countries that are part of the United Nations signed and ratified, and we not only have the convention, we have the convention, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and its optional protocol, which is a very tough and hard instruments, and many countries did not know. It's like they went ahead and ratified both the treaty and the optional protocol. And what does the optional protocol do? It gives an individual or a group of people to file a lawsuit against their state to the United Nations if their rights been hindered in any way and they could not get any legal support at their local level. So they can take it up a step further to United Nations, and United Nations will interfere, and that have a great impact on UPR, on your country report, and many things, in donor funding, and donations that come to the country from different donors, and so on. So it's a major dilemma. And then if we want to talk about how was the convention created, who was the initiator, I think we did answer these questions as I kind of damaged 9 and 10 together. But
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Tarwana, but it's just very interesting for me to know who was the driving force behind the convention, which countries were most interested in creating and signing and ratifying it.
Yeah, the actual driving force was civil society, really. Lobbied with countries, and mainly northern countries, did support that movement. It was the northern countries were more supportive than the southern country, even though the first countries who start ratifying was the southern countries rather than the northern countries. So you can see the cross-cutting issue in it. Most countries were interested, like again, like this is northern countries, the Nordic countries, European countries, because it was supported by EU, and EU have a strong human rights movements. Unfortunately, a lot of the third world countries signed, ratified, and then after when they ratified, they went back home, but they did not have any idea of how to implement. And that puts them in a major gap. Okay, so you signed and you ratified, but you did not implement the articles of the convention. And from an international law perspective, we all know that articles of any convention that the country signed on, it overcomes your local legislation. So it overrides the local legislations. But unfortunately, we are still fighting hardly with that due to marginalizing the issue of disability as not being given a priority enough as, for example, as a political issue or as an economical issue or something of that nature, which is totally wrong and totally against human rights. And we are, as human rights defenders and human rights experts, fighting hardly to do so. I will give you an example. We all know Sweden is probably #1 country in disability worldwide as far as meeting all kinds of requirements that you can think of. But Sweden was one of the last countries to ratify the convention. And one day I asked the Swedish delegation at the UN, it's like, why you have not ratified that yet? As at that time, I was the chairperson of the committee. And they said, well, we have a very simple answer. First, we need to take the convention, go back to our capital, make sure that every article of the convention is covered within our local legislation, and if the legislation needs to be amended or changed, we will change that, we will amend it accordingly. And after, when they done all that, you know, they have came and they ratified the convention. And that's like #1 country in the world in disability from all, you know, from all fronts. On the other hand, United States of America, I have brought Miss Hillary Clinton at that time, and she was Secretary of State. And I said, you know, United States needs to sign and ratify the convention, you know, because, you know, as you know, the US doesn't really sign much human rights treaties or so on. Why? Because they say, you know, our system covers all human rights and all citizens are protected by law, and so on. And 2 months later, anyway, the US signed, but they did not ratify, and they came back, they said, we have the ADA, which is American with Disability Act. The American with Disability Act is very similar to the convention, but with a very strict laws and penalties. So if someone breaks a certain rule or penalty, I mean, they can get penalty, a high penalty for such an action. So, for example, if a student with disability, different kind of disability, wants to go to public school and the school cannot reject it. If the school rejected him, then, you know, the student can turn around, or the family, and really file a lawsuit against the school for millions of dollars. So it's a federal crime in the United States. And because it started as a civil rights movement till they adopted in 1989 the ADA, which kind of put things into perspective as far as disability. So that basically their look at disability from America. So we look at, now we gave a comparison between two major countries, which is the US and Sweden, you know, and we saw how each country dealt with the situation. On your question, I think 11 says, which countries do you consider to be exemplary in terms of inclusion? I would say, again, you know, Nordic countries and most European countries, generally speaking.
But if you allow, please, Dr. Tarauna, so when we compare countries and we say that the United States has such a severe penalty system for violating laws about inclusion and people with disabilities, and I have my own experience, by the way, at the Florida State University. When I was there, I learned that if you go to the gym as absolutely like a normal student, you go to the gym and you break your arm, for example, the university is obliged to give you a note taker so that you would be able to go to the lecture and someone else is taking notes for you. And the university is obliged doing this. So that for me, it was such a surprise. So it means that the university cannot just say, okay, so you went to the gym, you broke your arm, it's your problem. Yes. No, they have to, they are obliged to help. And if we compare European, let's say, system with the American system, like what drives Europeans to obey to the laws on disabilities? Why do they obey? So we understand that in the United States, punishment, it's a severe punishment. That's why people are very cautious. And in Europe,
in Europe, they go about it more. I wouldn't say 100% similar, but they go at it from a right-based perspective by providing what we call reasonable accommodation to that particular student. Okay, so if that reasonable accommodation needs that someone take note for him, that's provided. You know, if that reasonable accommodation means that someone need to join the student class to support the student taking notes or understand, that's also available, you know, in many of the European countries. So, but the fine system in what America did, America just put a very heavy fine system, that you cannot even think about affording the fine because it's millions, if you violate someone right, especially when it comes to disability. And that's what ADA kind of covered. They said, wait a minute, we're going to put a heavy fine system. Therefore, people cannot break the law. If you go to a mall, a shopping center in America, and I'm sure, Ekaterina, you've seen it, you can see a lot of like maybe 30, 40 or 10 parking spaces reserved for persons with disabilities near the entrance of the mall. But most of the time you might see them empty and the rest of them are full. No one dares to come and park in that spot, because if he doesn't have permission, his car gets pulled over, he gets paid like pay $1,000 fine, and he might get thrown into jail, and the shopping center might be sued. So the legal system in America, because they're crazy about lawsuits and things of that nature, they kind of got that for granted. In the European system, they take it from a different perspective, that this is a human right, and a human right should not be violated. Therefore, we should accommodate to the max that we can. I hope I answered your question, Ekaterina.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, we are on question, what qualities do you think a teacher in inclusive education should have? And that's a good question. Again, we need to think about the ability and not the disability, okay? Because both kids have the ability to learn, and be very productive and be a great achievers. Now, there is a major role on the teacher, on the persons or students with disabilities, on the families, on the school system, the awareness level of the teachers dealing with having a student or several students with disability in the class is very, very important. And I think Olga would highlight. Olga, can you give your feedback on that particular question, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Definitely, we all know that a teacher in inclusive education needs remarkable qualities to succeed. First of all, we're talking about the professionalism and qualification. Definitely, teachers are supposed to have a strong background on human rights, first of all. Then might be maintaining a high level of integrity and competence, and their work helps children, parents, schools, and communities to feel respected and valued. And I guess the more important is about behavior modification, where a teacher's task is to create a friendly environment where students must be treated on equal basis, and where class is adapted to a student's need, keeping in mind the special requirements for a student, which gives a chance to compete on equal basis and be ensured that human rights are preserved.
Thank you, Olga. Anybody from the team, Khulud, Elena, want to collaborate on the issue or anything?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Katerina. Thank you so much for having this opportunity for me and everybody to participate. I would say when it comes to inclusive education, of course, on a human rights perspective, then we both are, all of us are speaking about the right for education, for equal education. And it is really important also to emphasize that inclusive education right now is becoming a global demand. I'm sure recently, especially with the further adoption of the convention as well, more demand has been taken into consideration to inclusive education. And as we all are well aware of, that inclusive education as well is relevant and revolves around the right for equal opportunities accessing education for everyone. I would also say that also the recent impact of this global pandemic, COVID-19, also in education, especially with so many countries, if not everybody, and every country has been turning to online education. And the access, when it comes to access of knowledge and of course of learning, then we would have to say that it came with many obstacles to providing that right of equal learning and knowledge and experience as well. Also, I'd like to refer to the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, as of course it was embedded as a right to access education, and as I mentioned, equal education and the right for everybody to access that right. Also, maybe what really differs, at least between the Universal Declaration and also the convention, is maybe we all know that the Universal Declaration sets the grounds for human rights, every right. But when the convention itself came, it came with specific emphasis on people with disabilities and accessing their rights, whether it's in inclusive education, whether it's regardless of whatever we are tackling with all the convention and where it came from, with articles. And also, I would say that maybe why it's really important to the convention to emphasize also inclusive education. I would say first, it would provide an equal opportunity for everybody to access education eventually, and also to enhance the concept of inclusive societies and friendly cities, also as we have mentioned today. Which is a universal concept, especially when it comes to involving this inclusive right to also to maybe sustainable development, and also to provide equal learning, knowledge, and expertise to everybody. But I would say that while we are maybe tackling and talking about maybe this inclusive education right, then we have to bear in mind that there are less privileged communities that do not have this access, maybe of...
Can I interfere here, Khulud, please?
Yes. No, I would just say that...
Yes, I understand what you're saying. But I don't know, this misprivileged word always triggered a nerve in me. We know that there has been marginalizations throughout history since United Nations got created, toward disability, toward Blacks, toward different kind of people. So this advantage, you know, we always like to think of it as an advantage point of view. And just to add to what you were mentioning, inclusivity or inclusive societies, again, you know, that just like you said, you know, that has been referred to in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 11 and Goal 12, that which are talking about smart cities and friendly cities. So we all know what's a smart city. So basically we have to live in a digitalized world, you know, and that impacts the education, you know, as well. So whether it's physically attending classes or e-education, and e-education is a phenomena that has been going for many years, you know. I, for one, you know, a couple of my masters, you know, I got them through e-education, you know, a long distance education. So it's just they want to reinforce that particular gap. Now, friendly cities means that it's an inclusive cities for all. A city should be adopted, should be friendly. for Mohammed, since he's in a wheelchair, for Khulud, non-wheelchair user, for Ekaterina, for everybody, for black, white, for elderly, for a pregnant woman with a trolley, and that's what makes a society diverse. You know, the diversity in society reflects on inclusive societies, and that's what we would like to reach, you know, that a fully inclusive society by all means, or an inclusive societies at large, where no one is left behind in this, whether in education or in any other thing that they do, a person do in his life or her life, because there is always access to education, access to health, access to employment, access to independent living, access to the justice system, and all of these, you know, we notice the word access always, you know, if we ensure that access and universality or universal design is being complied with and applied at all levels of designing whatever you're doing, you know, this way we can ensure that we are in the right path toward an inclusive education, because again, you know, inclusive education, you know, it's not about the student with disability himself or herself. It's about the entire system of the educational system. So, you know, all the way from the Ministry of Education downstream to that particular school or college, you know, that particular school or college also need to be fully in full compliance with the article of the conventions, which, you know, ensures that all are equal and they should receive education on an equal status without any discrimination whatsoever. Maybe a student is a slow learner, so the teacher, that puts a burden on the teacher. The teacher needs to have, you know, a wide mind
skills,
and yes, and special skills.
Yes.
We cannot train every teacher in the world and send them to special education classes, but these are major general awareness thing that should be born with any human. So maybe she should give him some time, extra time. Maybe when she explaining something to him or a particular topic, she can explain it in a slowly, or something double. Maybe what if you have a blind student, you know, or a student who cannot hear, forget the physical disability, you know. So that's where the school need to have like a screen with teletext, so, you know, the student who cannot hear can read, you know, the lecture. And schools should be provided with braille machines. I wouldn't say hundreds of them, but at least if they come up and they have a student who have visual impairment, you know, they can use these braille machines or their computer softwares. That what we have so many programs, technology has advanced so much, where there is simultaneous translation. Whatever the professor or the teacher say, it can be translated immediately if you have that particular program on your laptop or device, and that can convert it to a student with, you know, hearing impairment, for example, that can be converted to a sign language or to a teletexting, where we ensure that he or she would be able to have access to the same information that other teammates do have. If we want to say about, that's a good question, Ekaterina, number 14. What countries score high in the ranking on the development of inclusive space, and why them, and what's their success stories? I think that takes us back to early on questions, and I said typically it's the northern countries and in European countries, the G7 countries, you know, if we want to say that, you know, in a more political sphere. Why? Because they have the mandatory laws, they have the obligatory laws, they have the resources, and their look at human rights perspective are totally different from, let's say, a country in Africa, without mentioning any names, or in Asia that have lack of resources, whether it's financial resources or manpower resources, or their educational system are weak and don't know how to deal with the issue. And I mentioned that many countries who first ratified the convention, they were from third world countries. And once they ratified the convention, they went back home with the document, but they did not know how to implement on ground. And their local legislation hindered the way that the articles of the treaty should be implemented, and that puts them in a major chaotic situation, whereby you start to have to advocate again and fight again for education right, for this right, for independent living right. So it's like reinventing the wheel one more time, while the wheel is already invented, and no one should take these rights away, because they are ensured and secured to you by your constitution, So that will tackle question 14. And like I said, their story of success, what Ekaterina mentioned in the University of Florida, for example, if you go to play basketball or something and you fell and you break your leg or arm or something and cause you some sort of temporary disability, I would say, you're allowed to have for an assistant, to take notes for you, or to go with you to class, or to convey the message of the class. So that's been practiced in the Western sphere a lot more than our regions, unfortunately. And for your last question, what could you wish for experts and participants who participated in this meeting? I do wish peace, health, prosperity, and a widened horizon in human rights, where all of you become advocates for human rights in general, not just disability, but all human rights. And all of us need to think about the upcoming 2030 agenda. A lot of the countries in this region, or third world countries, looking at the 2030, while the developed countries, they are looking at the 2050 agenda and 2075 agenda already. So, we can see that they're planning for 50 years ahead and 30 years plan, while, we are killing ourselves with an 8.5-year plan of how can we meet the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which talks about two particular things, about the human being in one part and the ecosystem in another part, and how can we integrate, and to reduce poverty and reduce unemployment, and everybody should be well off on a non-discriminatory status. And of course, my last wish for the entire participant is best luck, and I hope all of you become supporters to our cause, whether it's at the Modern Institute or whether it's at Global Village. And I think if we join hand by hand, we can make a change in this world, in this particular issue. Right now, the 4 hottest issues that most donor countries tackling, they are tackling youth, they are tackling gender, they are tackling refugees, and they are tackling disability. So those are the 4 hottest item right now. Everybody is competing to reach to. With that, I conclude. Any other comments from the Global Village team? No? Okay.
I'm just extremely, like really, how to say, like very impressed by all the messages you have delivered today. I have written quite a lot for myself, because although we have been talking about some of those issues during our previous meetings, but you put those questions or those issues into such nice words that, you kind of like, you with one sentence you described what we kind of like hoped to discuss and describe in paragraphs or maybe pages. Thank you so much, and I praise your sense of timing, because it's like absolutely perfect timing. Really,
I take this as a compliment, Ekaterina.
Absolutely. So you touched upon all the questions and answered all the questions, plus like really with an extremely good time frame. I also would like to thank your colleagues Olga and Hulut for this absolutely remarkable, from my point of view, statement that inclusive education is in global demand nowadays. And of course, we understand that we are, okay, so maybe it's not the best words to use, but we are in trend now. So what we are doing by like discussing, moving forward the inclusive agenda and human rights agenda, we are very timely, and we are absolutely in trend of all the global processes. That's of course very nice. And I would also like to say to our audience that besides human rights background, Dr. Tarwani is also an architect, and this is very important, because we can talk as much as we want about inclusiveness in school or at the university, but when a person cannot even get out of the house and cannot even get those 500 meters from home to school or to the university, no inclusive education, so all our efforts, they are worthless. And of course, this universal design, as you mentioned, smart cities, it's extremely important if we want to move forward the agenda of inclusive education. Thank you so much for touching upon those fantastic, very important issues. And I would like to open the floor for discussion and join our colleagues with their questions. And I hope that your team will also take the floor and reply some of those questions. And I would like also to introduce one of your colleagues, Elena, who has not taken the floor for till now, but I know that she has also some supplementary information to add to your very interesting speech, Dr. Tarwan. Elena, please, you have the word.
Access to quality education for all is the health of the nation, is development of society, and the criterion of stability in the country, because inclusion is about transforming these systems and creating a better world for all through empathy, emotional intelligence, open-mindedness, caring for people, and the heart. I want to say thank you all for bringing up such an important topic as inclusive education today. Thank for your work, doctors, engineers, lawyers, teachers, scientists. For this, I am grateful to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elena. Yeah, indeed. So we have been discussing how we can how we can create the culture of inclusiveness in the society. And Elena mentioned just like key words is just developing empathy, emotional intelligence, and kindness, which is the basis for the inclusive society and for fair society. Thank you very much, Elena, for this important addendum to our discussion. And so, dear colleagues, I would like to open the floor for your questions now, for the discussion. So maybe you would like to comment on something which Dr. Tarwane or his colleagues said, or maybe you have your own question. Уважаемые коллеги, пожалуйста, подключайтесь к дискуссии. Возможно, у вас есть вопрос или комментарий. Вы можете даже на русском сказать, я, конечно же, переведу. Да, пожалуйста, включайте микрофон, и у нас свободная дискуссия. Professor Tasimova.
Yeah, I wish we are there with her.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we do.
Yes. I'm from Kazakhstan, West Kazakhstan. Do you know the Kazakhstan Republic?
Yes, we do, but I have not been there.
Yes. Kazakhstan has enjoyed to all the recommendations of the United States, of the OON, and so on. But today is the very great problem with the disability children, and with the diagnosis, and with the treatment, and with the rehabilitation. So I am going to have a speech on Balkan Congress in Turkey, just at the 1st of July. So I would like to raise this problem. Here are in our region no help for the disability children in any kind of it. So the treatment, the diagnosis, and to have the medicine and so on, so else. It's a very, very difficult problem in Kazakhstan. And what kind of connections, maybe helpness on the side of your community, you will occur to us. I am going to open the society of defending the right of disordered children. Just I am preparing the documents, and I shall have a speech on the Balkan Congress in Izmir, just at the 1st of July. But I am alone.
We are with you.
I have any helpness from our government, from our state, from our municipal organizations. It's a very difficult problem in Kazakhstan. So I am crying sauce just today. This is my problem, which I investigated and looked through. I have so many questions, so many facts, which will say sauce my souls. This is my problem.
If I may answer you, you are not alone. We are all here to support your initiative by all what it takes in order to make your initiative success. Initiatives, typically, I would say it's a process, and a process do take time. So I remember with my first visit to your region, I visited Turkmenistan, Ashgabat, for a UN mission 3 times. And my first mission, while I was having a dialogue with the members of the parliament, and I kept hearing the word invalid. It's like, I says, we have an international terminology called persons with disabilities, not invalid. Invalid to the rest of the world means, it's like you have a barcode here and someone can scan it and can say your validity date expires, or whatever. So but I understand that it was a linguistic thing, but that doesn't mean that we could not use the proper linguistic issues whereby we can say persons living with disabilities, because again, that does not hinder any of their capabilities. They are a human being with full inherited rights, and no one have the right to take these rights away. I also noticed in your country that the medical model of disability is still taking place, where we said earlier on, disability went through three eras. One era in the 50s and 60s, it was the medical model whereby they see you useless. Then it shifted from medical to charitable model. But then, it's like, okay, let's give this guy or this girl this and do out of charity, and even though that's a big violation of human rights. And then when the convention came, what's so special about this only United Nations convention is we call it a twin track approach convention. Twin track means it's a right-based approach, okay, which is your right. And the second track is a social based approach. So it's a right-based and a social-based approach. And that's why we call it a twin track convention. And none of the United Nations convention have that kind of setup. And that's what makes the CRPD very unique in dealing with it. But I do agree with you, my dear doctor. A lot of work needs to be done when it comes to disability in general, and to ensure inclusiveness and friendly cities and so on, because you do have the capabilities, you do have the knowledge, the resources, you do have what it takes. It's just applying that and make it to a reality. We need to work on amending legislations, and stick to the legislation of the UN Convention, because it's a mandatory, especially if your country is member of the UN Convention. It signed and ratified the convention, so it's obligated by law, by international law, to do so. So there is many ways to approach it. We can approach it from a diplomatically phase first, and talk to your different people at different ministries, to diplomats, to whatever, to lay the groundwork for us. And then after that, along with the activities and programs that you have in mind, which we can support you 100%, to make your initiative a success. Once you start rolling on that track, then we know you're drawing a roadmap toward your vision. And your end result of your vision is the protection and promotion of human rights in general.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I said about my effort that I'm going to organize in the region NGO to defend the rights of children. So little children who doesn't speak, who can do anything, just anything. So the medical workers also doesn't know how to diagnose them, and they give only psychotropic medicines to them, but they are autists, you see? And we have the methods, only Soviet methods of treating these kinds of children. But there are many methods in high quality countries as America, as Turkey, and in Europe. They treat in another way, in another methods. But Kazakhstan have any recommendations about it. You see, that is why I see that we must defend the rights of little children in order to treat them in a high-class medical way, as in foreign countries. This is my effort.
No, yeah, your point is well understood, and to me, it should be like a start of a civil rights movement being backed up by the UN Convention, which reinforce these rights. It doesn't matter whether they are children or have many difficulties, they still have the rights to learn, the right to education, the right to live, the right to produce, the right to do. They need to think of habilitation and rehabilitation, which these are two articles of the convention. That's from one aspect. And then they need to think inclusiveness and inclusive education, the right to health, proper health, the right to have to work, the right to have anything they want, because they are equal citizens. That doesn't mean because he or she can see or can walk or cannot hear or whatever, it means their human rights is being taken away from them. No, not at all. They have the same right as everybody else, and it should not be hindered. It should not, there is no mitigation when it comes to human rights. Human right is a human right. It applies to me, applies to you, applies to everybody in this globe. So definitely we need to handle this in a very soft, diplomatic manner. And I salute you for your initiative. The creation of such a center is a major step forward, and the rest of success will follow, my dear. Believe me, it takes it's one step at a time. It might take us a longer time, but at the end of the day, end results will be achievable. If you it's all about will. If you have a will, there is a way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Terwane. I think that we can also help Professor Tasimova in another way and just connect her to similar organizations in different countries, so that she can structure her agenda and continue her important work, not alone, but in a consortium with other organizations. And I know that among our participants here today, there are also representatives of civil society movements and civil society organizations from different countries who might want to get in touch with Professor Tasimova and give her a hand. And I suggest you, Ayslo Ahmadievna, to write your contact details in the chat, so that our colleagues could contact you and see what could be done together, how they could support you and strengthen your initiative. And I see that there is one more participant who would like to take the floor. It's Susanna Petrosyan, our colleague from Armenia. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such a important discussion, and it was very, very interesting to hear the speaker. Thank you very much. And in your speech, I focused on the statement that you said, inclusive education is not about children with disabilities. It's about the system. And in Armenia, I'm a social educator, and I've founded an organization called Initiative for Education, Social and Legal Inclusion. And we have pilot projects on inclusive education, and we strive to help government to refine the inclusive education in Armenia. So I would like to ask you, in Armenia, we have this problem. Even the specialists working in our field, they can say that children, inclusive children, so they are focused on children. and they like stereotype the children and inclusive education. So what is your solution? How we can transit from children with disability to the inclusive education system? I know that the question is very global, but I'm sure you have some short approach key from what we can start, changing stereotypes.
Hard work. First of all, stereotyping and labeling is totally forbidden, and it's totally against human right, regardless of whatever issue it is, whether it's disability, whether it's on ground of color, race, sex, gender, whatever, So that's definitely a no-no scenario. Now, how can you go forward toward inclusive education? Again, you have to think of the two parts. They are integrated together. The inclusive education, because who are you providing education to? You're providing education, let's say, for example, to children. Among those children, you're gonna see the blonde child and the black-haired child, and the child with disability, a child with non-disability. So a child that's a male, a child that's a female. So that's diversity in class, okay? Diversity in a human being. So your system should be focused on the entire scope, from a major umbrella, from macro level to micro level. So drawing a roadmap, toward achieving these goals, you have a set of goals you have to set, and just have to work on these goals one by one till you at least get the cart rolling. Once it's rolling, and having the civil society in particular supportive to your initiative, because I have noticed, probably as a former diplomat, that civil society have a great impact on governments. Government's not gonna change laws because they don't like to do that. They like to look at for their interest, But when there is a huge civil society voice, one voice of a million, for example, that can have a tremendous echo at the government, and the government, therefore, by pressure, they will have to rethink about that particular issue and say, hey, it's not one person is talking, it's a majority of people are talking about it, plus, we're really doing bad in this particular area, even though, we have entered into international treaties that we should say 1, 2, 3. So you always need to approach the governments from the gaps that they have, because the governments have a lot of gaps. And if you, I don't want to use the word attack, but if you approach the government from that particular gap that they have, believe me, you will embarrass them, especially if during international forums or international events whereby a lot of people from different countries are aware, they're gonna feel shy and close their eyes and say, hey, shame on us that we're doing that. So there is some psychology involved into it. So psychology, diplomacy, human right, convention, all of these things, if you add them all together, believe me, you have a very strong tool to approach any issue that you want.
Thank you very much. I will take the advice and will more focus on gaps. Thank you.
We and I'm sure the Modern Institute are always there to help in any issue that any of the participants need toward this particular issue or other issues as well. And I'm sure Ekaterina agree with me, I hope.
Yeah, surely, I absolutely agree. And this is what I wanted to suggest, that we exchange contacts because I think it will be very valuable for everyone to follow up on this conversation. So I really suggest everyone to just write what organization you represent and how we can reach you. So that we can maybe strengthen our connections, and as Dr. Darwana said, to speak not in one voice, but speak in a lot of voices, international, making it really a global village. And I see that your colleague Khulud is also ready to step in and comment on the question of Susanna, please.
Thank you, my dear Katerina. I would also maybe add to what Dr. Darwana said. Usually building alliances of civil societies, again, the role of civil society is really important to tackle the issue. First, you can work on the advocacy on one hand. On the other hand, the convention itself, also the awareness on the importance of the convention, and especially when it comes to inclusive education, as maybe I think this is a role for everybody to do within our countries as well. Some of the countries have ratified, some did not. And even if the country did not ratify to certain articles, that does not mean there's always a room for civil societies to actually advocate such cases. And what's more important than inclusive education, especially these days, as I mentioned before, as a global demand. Also, not just civil societies, DPOs, the media. Media is really important, especially these days. If you could affiliate with maybe some of the media institutions within the country as well, to maybe shed light and spot on how it is really important to involve the country and to adopt and enhance its role within adopting the inclusive education. I think this could be one of the tips as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Khulud.
And thank you very much, Khulud. I have the impression that Ayslu Ahmadiyevna, you would like to add something also and come back to your question.
So this is the problem, not only for conversation, but the problem is doing very active positions in order to defend the rights of the children, because the problem is awful. I see many children who doesn't go to the kindergarten because of the no specialists, and any sport complexes where they can go, and just in summer, all young families are sitting at home with these disability children. I see with my eyes. That is why I have prepared so long dispute for the Balkan Congress in Izmir, in Turkey, and I shall speak up about it, because there are no committee, there are no organizations by the Kazakhstan state which will do something for these children. We are only speaking, we are only gathering some conversations, but doing nothing. In comparison with Ukraine, with other European countries, during the year, I'm hearing and I'm listening all the speeches of our colleagues, very high quality colleagues from Belarus, from Kyiv, from other countries, from Spain and other. Thank you, Irina, which give us so much information about it. And I have gathered all the problems in Kazakhstan today. So I'm so unhappy that our country, civil country, do nothing about it. That is why I put the question to the Professor Mohammed, what kind of efforts he will do in order to help me to raise this problem. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you.
I can understand your worries very well, but believe me, step one is to initiate the initiative. So once it's physical on ground, by using all tactics that we have, all international instruments, by using the focus, as Khulud said, media can be a very effective tool to bring to surface your issue up to the decision makers, lobbying with your parliamentarian. At least some of the parliamentarians need to start raising this issue at the parliament. So, you know, you can have the political echo to it, and the strong alliance, your strong civil society alliance, that definitely it's a must, because, you know, 1,000 voices is better than one voice. It can be echoed. And believe me, the government will have to listen, you know. It might not listen today, but it will listen tomorrow. If it's not tomorrow, day after tomorrow. So advocacy, you know, takes time, takes a long time. Sometimes, you know, it takes a year, and sometimes it could take, you know, 50 years. But if I give you an example, you know, of how status quo can change with Martin Luther King, you know, back in the 1960s, when the blacks were not supposed to have any rights in America whatsoever. You know, you used to go to certain restaurants, and right at the door it will say, "No dogs, no blacks," and that's a shame and disgrace to humanity. But then, you know, he created that inside civil rights movement. And one day he delivered a speech to major people, and he just said 3 words, you know, "I have a dream," you know. And his dream is to have equalization, you know, equality between black or white. You know, they should be the same. And they did their major march from Montgomery, Alabama, all the way to Washington State. It was a 1 million person on foot march. And when they reached Washington, D.C., you know, the Congress and the Senate and the politician of the American politicians of in Washington, D.C., they had to listen. And since that day, you know, blacks, Americans got their equal rights and start to be treated equally as whites. So no more, you know, black have to sit at the end of the public transportation while white people sit up front, or, you know, no segregation. I mean, segregation system in schools. They start to go to the same schools, and but it took time, you know. It takes time, and as I said, you know, typically I call these are processes, and a process do take time, you know. Just you know, it's hard to happen overnight, you know. But it needs time and patience and efforts, and, you know, and that's why most of us human rights advocates are, you know, not thought of as businessmen, you know, and making tons of piles of money, you know, because, you know, we're trying to advocate for rights of human beings, that all humans are equal, and that's why, you know, we all live in one globe, you know. That's why I called my company Global Village. You know, it's a small, the whole globe is a small village, you know. There is no difference between me, you, Ekaterina, Khulud, Olga, whoever. You know, at the end of the day, we are a human being, you know, regardless of our geographic location. But that does not mean that my rights should be solicited from me, you know. It should be there. So it takes a lot of effort, my dear, and we are here to extend all kind of support that you need to stand by you and your initiative.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Tarawani. I remember the movie that I think that everyone watched, Numbers. It's about NASA and the situation when a Black colleague had to go to the restroom to another building. And actually the situation lasted until one brave man took a hammer and put down the sign saying restroom for white people. And he said there is no difference between white and Black people. So
that's true.
Practically, so of course, I completely agree with you that in interest representation, in lobbying, in advocacy, time is the king. You need time for everything. But sometimes you need one brave man who will take a hammer and just delete the signs, delete.
I'll do it for you. I will do it for you.
Yeah, so we are very happy and grateful that we found you as a partner, and we hope that a lot of initiatives will take less time to accomplish when we are together and when we speak in different voices. Yeah, this is absolutely true. And again, I encourage everyone to exchange contact details, because maybe among those contacts, there will be this brave or that brave man who will help solve your situation.
Yeah. Can I make a suggestion? Can everybody like send their emails, phone contacts, for example, to you, Ekaterina, and then you can distribute that email forwarded to everybody. This way we ensure that everybody is involved. Because I saw a lot of emails and some Russian writing and I couldn't read, you know, so, but that will make it easy on us.
Yeah. Yes, I will do it with no problem. I just need to ask the rest of the participants. Уважаемые коллеги, вы согласны с тем, что мы вышли всем участвующим сегодня в дискуссии электронные сообщения и контакты, в общем-то, всех участников, да, чтобы вот это предложение доктора Таrawani, чтобы у всех были контакты участников для последующей, возможно, коммуникации совместной. Вы согласны? Если кто-то не согласен, пожалуйста, напишите «меня не включайте», тогда мы вас точно не будем включать в эту коммуникацию.
So I can say спасибо.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Tarawani, for your time, for a very interesting conversation, very interesting expertise that, of course, you took so many years to collect. And we appreciate your experience. We appreciate that you were here today with us. And I don't know if I need to do this, but I think it's a very big, kind of, for me, a very big sign of respect that Dr. Tarawani, he is a disabled person himself, so he knows what he's talking about when he's talking about disability, inclusion, and human rights. This is the person who is not just advocating for inclusion, he is the person who is in this epicenter of inclusion himself. And I can just like applaud you for your courage and for your energy and motivation that you gave all of us today. Thank you.
Nothing is impossible, my dear. Everything is possible. If there is a will, there is a way.
Sure, and I think that on this very encouraging note, we can conclude today's meeting by thanking all colleagues from Global Village who were here today with us. It's Elena, Khulud, Olga, of course, Dr. Mohammed, and I hope that we will meet again soon and we'll continue this discussion. And I really hope that we will be able to get into projects together, projects that will take us from talking to doing. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much. And we have the same mutual feeling. We look forward to continue and collaboration with you and your esteemed team and your wide network. And we're here to support in any capacity that we have. And I thank everybody who was participating today in this very unique gathering.
Thank you very much. Я благодарю всех вас, уважаемые коллеги, что несмотря на лето, несмотря на каникулы, отпускные, которые уже у вас, вы все-таки находите время присоединяться к нам и обсуждать очень важные вопросы. Спасибо, что были сегодня с нами. Я желаю всем удачного завершения недели и, конечно же, отличных летних каникул. До свидания.
Thank you so much, Katerina, and all the participants. It was very interesting and encouraging discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.